in Australia.
Tonight, Daniel Andrews returns serve and angry tennis players forced into hard quarantine. Good evening, I'm Juanita Phillips. This is ABC News. No shot, no play. Could people who refuse to get vaccinated be banned from certain venues? The unusual way that police in Bali are making sure foreigners mask up. And pressure on Australia's bowlers as the fourth test comes down to the final day. The Victorian government has hit back at tennis players complaining about their strict quarantine conditions. The Premier says they were well aware of the rules before they got on a flight to come here. More than 70 players and dozens of officials are now confined to their hotel rooms after another case of coronavirus was detected from one of the charter flights. World number one Novak Djokovic has reportedly asked tournament organisers to allow players greater freedom, but Daniel Andrews says that won't be happening. Tom Maddox reports.
Innovation in isolation. On day 4 of hotel lockdown, players unpacked much-needed deliveries and pushed their confines to the limit. After describing the conditions as insane, French player Elise Cornet sent Twitter into meltdown, prompting her to apologise. She said, "Your reaction to this tactless comment made me realise what you've been through last year and how much you suffered." The backlash didn't end there. World number one Novak Djokovic reportedly issued a letter to Tennis Australia demanding fitness and training equipment in all hotel rooms, better food, a reduced number of days in hard isolation, permission to visit your coach, and to move players to private homes with a tennis court for practice.
People are free to provide lists of demands, but the answer is no.
Daniel Andrews says no one will get special treatment.
People were told what the rules were. The rules will not be changing because the public health advice is where those rules came from.
It's not ideal, obviously. We all not going to be as fit after the 14 days when we come out of it.
The number of players in hard hotel quarantine has grown to 72 after another positive case was revealed overnight. Some have complained about the conditions, but they're getting little sympathy.
Harden up. I mean, as I understand it, the get through the first round, there's $100,000 on offer to any player that does that. That's not a bad payday in anyone's mind.
Players who tested negative were ready to hit the courts, but were told to stay in their rooms. So far, one player has tested positive, but test results for the entire playing cohort have been delayed. It means COVID-negative players are set to enter another day of strict lockdown. And while most appear happy to follow the rules, preparation for next month's Grand Slam is becoming more difficult. Tom Maddox, ABC News, Melbourne.
First, Qantas suggested it would only let passengers fly overseas if they were vaccinated. Now, the Premier says it'd be a good idea if pubs and restaurants took a similar approach with their customers. The state government is yet to develop a policy, but denying people entry to venues based on their vaccine status could be a legal minefield. Here's state political reporter Ashley Raper.
COVID has created challenges for so many businesses. Now a vaccine is imminent, there's more to consider. Should people who don't get vaccinated be allowed into venues?
In terms of safety, it is important because there's a lot of other people that do come into the cafe and we don't want to spread anything anymore.
But for this cafe in Parramatta, it will pose a problem as well.
A lot of people are choosing not to get vaccinated, but they still want to come into the shop, which might be an issue.
The issue is legal and ethical.
I think that's quite reasonable in a sense that, in the broader sense where everyone can stay safe.
It's just too much, it's too far,
The Premier is still considering her policy approach and is looking at ways to persuade people to get the vaccine. She supports the concept of businesses banning people who refuse to get it.
We'd like there to be an incentive system where people are encouraged to have it.
Proof of being vaccinated could be shown on the Service New South Wales app.
People make up their own rules if they run a business or have a workplace about what they feel is COVID safe.
It would seem to be extremely unlikely that that could be done without, or should be done, without a considerable amount of legal work in the background.
It could be done through legislation or regulation, but there's no indication the state government will go down that path. What the Premier seems to be doing is trying to start a conversation ahead of a vaccine rollout and gauge community reaction.
I think it's important for the community to start thinking about the vaccine and how they feel about it.
There were no new locally acquired cases recorded in New South Wales, while the number of people who were tested dropped to less than 9,000. That's the lowest number in a month. And as police investigate yet another apparent breach of the rules, the government is nervous about further easing restrictions. Ashley Raper, ABC News, Sydney.
Victoria has further eased travel restrictions for people in New South Wales. There are significant changes for residents in Sydney as well as border communities. Reporter Michaela Ortolan is in Wodonga on the Victorian side of the border. Michaela, what changes came into force at 6 o'clock tonight?
Well, it's great news for Victorians still stuck in parts of New South Wales. The Blue Mountains, Wollongongs and most of Greater Sydney are now classified as orange zones, which means people in these areas can travel across the border with a permit as long as they get a COVID test within 72 hours of entering Victoria and isolate until they return a negative result. Now, there are still 10 local government areas around Sydney's inner west and west that are considered red zones. So the only way to enter the state of Victoria is through an exemption if you're in those locations. It's also good news for border towns. There's 16 local government areas along the New South Wales border that have been reclassified as a green zone. So Victorians can now visit these areas. They still need to apply for a permit, but they no longer have to isolate or get a test on their return to the state.
And Michaela, how are tourism operators there feeling after hearing this news?
I've spoken to a number of tourism operators today and they're all very excited, as you can imagine. A lot of them rely heavily on Victorians who live outside of that border bubble zone that was listed. So these changes essentially mean someone from, say, Melbourne can visit towns like Albury or Moama. They can stay there and they can travel back to the state with a permit and don't have to isolate. So they've told us that their phones have been running hot ever since the announcement, with many people wanting to book a holiday along the Murray River just in time for the Australia Day long weekend.
Michaela Ortolan reporting there. The Secretary of the Department of Health, Brendan Murphy, says he's not unduly concerned about a small number of deaths in Norwegian nursing homes that have been linked to the Pfizer vaccine. Those who died were frail and it's not clear if the vaccines caused their deaths. But regulators are seeking more information. The host of the ABC's Coronacast, Dr Norman Swan, takes a look at how concerned we should be.
Never before have new vaccines been developed, tested and rolled out to millions in less than a year. So when there's news of a potential problem, like the deaths of frail elderly people in Norway, how do we make sense of it? Clinical trials lasting a few months have been conducted in around 40,000 people for each vaccine. But they only tell you about side effects in those selected for the trial. Rare side effects in the real world usually emerge after a vaccine has been released. That's when it became clear there's a small risk of serious allergy with the Pfizer vaccine. Now there's the death of a US doctor due to hemorrhage from low blood platelets, and these deaths in frail elderly Norwegians. And let me tell you, there'll be more scares as vaccines are rolled out. Regulators have to separate coincidence from true vaccine effects, and then decide what to do. They do that by looking for similar reports from the millions of people already immunised and whether there are emerging patterns. Regulators are already onto the potential for a severe allergy or anaphylaxis from the Pfizer vaccine. And if there is a real risk to frail elderly, then they might be excluded from some vaccines. So far, the problem in the frail elderly doesn't seem to be widespread, so it may be that other countries aren't vaccinating terminally ill people. The story of the doctor's death is troubling, but his condition is so rare that it should be readily noticed and reported if it's happening elsewhere. So far, so good, but this is just the kind of side effect that does worry authorities, because unlike allergy and the frail elderly, they may be impossible to avoid. For you and me, watching from the sidelines, it's important to sit back a bit. Almost all these reports will end up being coincidence. And with huge amounts of data available in real time, serious problems should be able to be sorted out at high speed.
A small town in the Upper Hunter is in mourning after a horrific, deadly head-on crash. 3 people were killed and a man is in a serious but stable condition. A couple were returning home from a night out when their rideshare van collided with a ute near Muswellbrook. Jake Lapham reports.
Father of 4, Robert Baker, started his own rideshare business to help young people in particular get home safely after a night out. The 44-year-old had completed hundreds of trips, but last night one of them turned fatal.
It would appear that 2 cars have collided head-on, and as a result of that, the 3 people have been killed.
In Mr Baker's van were Tracy and Brad Strawn, who'd been picked up from the Muswellbrook Hotel, where they were regulars. Miss Strawn died at the scene while her husband was taken to hospital in a critical condition.
She was a local school teacher. He works in the mines locally. They've both got a very strong friend base in town. I don't know, it's just hard to describe.
The crash has devastated the community.
We're getting a lot of people coming in and paying their respects.
It's very sad news to wake up to this morning, and of course on the top of some other fatalities that we've had in the last 3 months or so.
Investigators spent all night combing over the scene. A man in his 30s was driving the ute that slammed into the van. He was also killed in the crash.
It's a head-on collision, so yes, one of the vehicles must have been in the wrong place at the wrong time.
A report will be prepared for the coroner. Jake Lapham, ABC News, Muswellbrook.
Tropical cyclone Kimi has intensified to a Category 2 system as it tracks down the North Queensland coast. Communities from Innisfail to Ayr are in the warning zone as the region braces for destructive winds, heavy rainfall and abnormally high tides. The cyclone isn't forecast to make landfall, but the Weather Bureau has warned its path is erratic.
This particular cyclone is unusually unpredictable. We're seeing it's changing its track every 3 hours or so.
There still remains a distinct possibility of Kimi crossing the coast as a Category 2 system, and that's in the warning areas.
Authorities are urging residents not to be complacent and to continue to prepare. The system is expected to weaken tomorrow. Depending on where you live, the amount you pay in council rates could soon be about to change. When local governments merged 4 years ago, the boundaries changed, but the way that rates were calculated stayed the same. From mid-year, those merged councils will have to adopt a uniform approach to rates, and that means some households will have to pay more.
If there's one thing most people can agree on, it's that no one likes a rate rise.
I don't like any rates going up at all, thank you very much.
I can't do much about it. They're going to go up, aren't they?
For some, it's coming.
Hold the referendum.
When councils were controversially amalgamated, the way rates were calculated across the different suburbs was kept. But by mid-year, merged local governments need to start charging rates using just one system.
It's taken them time to need to understand how much they needed to adjust their rates.
Currently, in the now City of Parramatta area, for example, someone who used to live in the former Auburn Council, on average, pays much less than a resident of the former Hornsby Council.
Councils need the flexibility to adjust their rates in line with their community expectations.
The single system will, on average, see some pay more and some less. And it's being proposed the price changes be gradually transitioned in over the next 4 years.
Quite frankly, we were given a dog's breakfast when we amalgamated.
The Cumberland City Council isn't happy. It'll need to charge more in some lower socio-economic areas and wants a slower transition.
And now we're in a position where we're forced to harmonise these rates, and it's not necessarily a good thing.
Reforming council rates, something which affects so many people, means public consultation is needed. Anyone who wants their voice heard on the issue has until the start of February to make a submission to the state government.
Every resident across every council area get in contact with the consultation process, let the state government know.
The government is also asking for feedback on changes to other measures like rate capping. Jonathan Hare, ABC News, Sydney.
Still to come this hour, could we be on the cusp of another housing boom?
So, congratulations. Historically, a 1% fall in the cash rate will boost house prices by about 10%. We're seeing very strong growth in lending among first home buyers. As those buyers return to the market, that's really where we see that upward price pressure over the next year.
Plus, the growing push to radically overhaul hotel quarantine. That's coming up.
Former FBI Director James Comey says a federal criminal prosecution of Donald Trump after he leaves office could be bad for the country. State Capitol buildings are on high alert across the US, with pro-Trump demonstrations planned ahead of President-elect Joe Biden's inauguration on Thursday. Donald Trump could face a Senate trial as soon as this week after he was impeached for a second time for inciting an insurrection against the US Capitol earlier this month. It could prevent Mr Trump from running for national office again, and James Comey says that's as far as federal authorities should go in holding him to account.
The country needs to find a way to heal itself, and that'll be much, much harder if the Donald Trump show is on our television screens every single day in the nation's capital, which is where it would have to be prosecuted in United States versus Donald Trump.
Several governors have declared states of emergency and others have closed their capitals to the public until after Joe Biden's inauguration. The US, France and Germany are among the countries that have condemned the arrest of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny. The critic of Vladimir Putin was detained when he returned to Moscow for the first time since he was poisoned with a nerve agent. Europe correspondent Nick Dole reports.
Alexei Navalny looked healthy as he boarded a plane in Berlin, determined to return to Russia. It's been 5 months since he was poisoned in Siberia with the nerve agent Novichok and airlifted to Germany for treatment.
As a citizen of Russia, I have the absolute right to return home.
Before taking off, the defiant Kremlin critic posted a video of his wife Yulia quoting a Russian TV drama to his millions of supporters on social media.
Bring us some vodka, boy, we're flying home.
Russian prison services vowed to arrest him on arrival, saying that being outside the country violated the terms of a 2014 suspended sentence for embezzlement.
Those in power are not just disgusting thieves. They are also totally pathetic people who are spending their time on complete nonsense.
At passport control in Moscow, he was confronted by police and threatened with physical force if he disobeyed detention orders. His lawyer wasn't allowed to accompany him. Earlier, riot police cleared the arrivals hall of his supporters and detained more than 50 people. Then Alexei Navalny's plane was suddenly diverted to a different airport in the city. Last month, President Putin dismissed accusations he was behind the near-deadly poison attack on Mr. Navalny.
Who needs him? If someone had wanted to poison him, they'd have finished him off.
The couples refused to be driven into exile in a foreign country, saying the charges against him are politically motivated. With this direct challenge to President Putin, there are fears Mr. Navalny could now spend years in jail. Nick Dole, ABC News, London.
Authorities in Bali are taking an interesting approach to foreigners who refuse to wear masks in public. They're forcing people to do push-ups. The crackdown comes as the country's COVID-19 infections surge to new highs. Indonesia correspondent Anne Barker reports.
You have mask? If I get off. Okay, come.
This is how Bali is cracking down on people who refuse to wear masks in public.
25.
Along with a small fine, they're being ordered to get down and push up 25 times as punishment. No excuses accepted.
I have to to everybody. I can't do exercise. You must be... All right. So do you have any? Yeah, 25. 25, easy.
Authorities say the Balinese are also guilty of not following the rules, but often foreigners, including Australians, refuse to pay up, so they're told to push up instead.
Get up, get up, get up, mister. Get up. I give you mask. Yeah.
Despite skyrocketing infections across Indonesia, including Bali, many still flout the rules on masks and social distancing that have been mandatory for months. Bali's governor is now warning foreigners without masks that they'll be banned from tourist sites and restaurants.
There will be a crackdown because there are still many tourists not wearing masks.
Some tourists support calls to deport those who ignore health protocols.
I think if they don't follow the rules, then maybe send them home. I don't know.
I think push-ups, what does that do?
Almost 600 people have died in Bali from coronavirus and almost 21,000 have been infected, a 17% increase this month alone. Despite the surge, some foreigners don't see the need for the stricter stance.
I'm in the open air. The closest person to me is you. My friends are 2 metres away, and if you'd like to film the surroundings, there's no one within 20 metres of me.
Then again, some in Bali take it to the other extreme. Even their four-legged friends are masked up. Anne Barker, ABC News.
He was a convicted murderer and also a renowned music producer. Phil Spector has died at the age of 81. Spector produced 20 top 40 hits between 1961 and 65, working with the Beatles, the Righteous Brothers and Leonard Cohen. His signature production technique, the wall of sound, involved layering several instruments to produce an orchestral bass. His life was blighted by drug and alcohol addiction. In 2009, he was convicted of murdering Hollywood actress Lana Clarkson and given a sentence of 19 years to life. Spector was diagnosed with COVID-19 4 weeks ago and transferred to hospital, but state prison officials say he died of natural causes. To finance now, the local share market fell today, as did the Australian dollar. Here's Alan Kohler.
Well, there were solid falls by the miners and banks today for no particular reason, and the main bright spot was JB Hi-Fi, which forecast a huge 86% increase in first half profit, with the CEO, Richard Murray, saying they're basking in an Australian economy that is in remarkably good shape, thanks to all the stimulus, a lot of which is being spent on new tellies and computers, as well as being saved. Most commodities fell, which helps explain why resources stocks went down, although the iron ore and coal prices went up. The dollar slipped back below 77 US cents, and global markets were weaker, especially in Asia today, except for China, where December quarter GDP was unveiled, and the Chinese economy finished 2020 accelerating, with growth of 6.5% in the final quarter, making it 2.3% for the year, the only major economy actually to grow last year. And as you can see, it's had a proper V-shaped recovery, with economic growth back to what it was before the pandemic. And that's partly because they've hardly got any cases now, and also because global trade in goods has bounced back much faster than it did after the GFC. Trade in services, like tourism and education, is still well down, but services are what China buys. It sells goods. That chart came from the World Bank's latest Global Economic Prospects report, which was out the other day, with this as the centrepiece. The world economy is going to be trailing pre-COVID forecasts for years to come. And that's finance.
After all the drama on and off the field this summer, the Australia-India Test series will go down to the final day at the Gabba. The fourth and final test is now in the hands of Australia's bowlers, with India chasing 328 runs for victory.
In a series where the two sides have been inseparable after 4 days, the deciders still on a knife's edge. With Brisbane's weather threatening time at the crease, Australia's openers came out swinging.
Just amazing timing from Marcus Harris.
But the first wicket...
There's a glove on it, there's a big appeal and given. Beautifully bowled, Shardul Thakur.
Led to a flurry. David Warner made 48, his best score this summer.
Yes, and so does Paul Wilson.
Marnus Labuschagne made quick runs but only lasted 26 minutes. Matthew Wade lasted just 3 balls.
A strangle down the leg side and India fight back again, just what they needed.
But even with wickets falling from every angle, the injury-plagued tourists looked battered and bruised. Australia continued to put the foot down.
The dive in the end for Steve Smith. Good hustle there.
Steve Smith had a life.
Smith advancing, throws everything at it. Doesn't get enough.
To get to 50, but was out due to a brute from Mohammad Siraj. That was the signal for Cameron Green to go on the attack.
Oh, put away beautifully.
But the wickets continued to fall. First Green, then captain Tim Payne.
Has he got a top edge on that, Tim Payne? Richard Park thinks so.
Rain forced an early tea as captain and coach deliberated on when to declare.
There's a brains trust to the Australian team.
They'd send in Australia's bowlers who came and went.
Straight to Mayank Agarwal. That's out. That's the 9th wicket now, Nathan Lyon.
All out, the home side set India 328 runs for victory. The rain delayed play again in the final session, setting up for an enthralling final day at the Gabba. Brittany Klein, ABC News, Brisbane.
28 years after his death, Sidney Nolan is continuing to surprise the art world. A series of portraits by the artist have been uncovered in his archives, and they're being revealed to the public for the first time.
It's Sidney Nolan like you've never seen him before. 50 colourful spray-painted portraits created by the famed Australian artist in Wales in 1982.
He was in a remote farmhouse and he picked up a few cans of paint and spray paint and decided to experiment.
The paintings had been stored at the late artist's home in the UK, but have now made their way across the world, soon to be on display for the first time as part of the Mona Foma Arts Festival in Hobart.
In 1982, it probably was seen as something a bit radical, maybe too radical, to be displayed publicly. So 38 years later, I think we've caught up with Sid.
Nolan is best known for his series of works about the infamous bushranger Ned Kelly, but his new works show him in a more contemporary light.
Because the works are done in spray paint, you can imagine a lot in the work because they're not defined and we don't know who the portraits are.
It's not just the prospect of seeing previously unknown artworks by Sidney Nolan that has art fans around the world excited. It's also the prospect of being able to snap up one of the rare pieces.
Nolans have made over $5 million in the past. These works are just under 10,000.
My phone's actually vibrating in my pocket right now. And yeah, I've got hundreds and hundreds of emails.
And the buzz is likely to continue, with more exhibitions of never-before-seen Nolan works already in the pipeline. Kate Ainsworth, ABC News, Hobart.
Archaeologists in Egypt have discovered a trove of ancient treasures, which experts say could rewrite the history of the entire region. The antiquities include dozens of coffins and sarcophagi, which date back 3,000 years to the New Kingdom period. They also unearthed a funerary temple belonging to a queen in a vast necropolis south of Cairo.
In 2010, we found a pyramid of a queen, but we never know the name of the queen. Only yesterday, we found a temple for the pyramid, and we found the name of the queen. Her name was Nit.
Another key discovery was a 4-metre-long papyrus, including texts of the Book of the Dead, which was written to guide the deceased through the underworld. Time for the weather now, and we've got a severe thunderstorm warning for the state's northeast corner this evening, bringing even more heavy rain. In contrast, Sydney had the perfect beach weather today. Sunny blue skies and a top of 30 along the coast. It was cooler than average overnight, except in the northeast, where minimums were much higher, 25 at Byron. The northeast also got all of today's rainfall allocation. 50 to 60 millimetres fell around Lismore and Casino to 4 o'clock this afternoon, and this evening's thunderstorms are forecast to deliver more of the same. Maximum temps were below average across the ranges and in the west, tending above average in the state's east. Nationally, Tropical Cyclone Kimi is causing wind and rain to intensify in North Queensland. There are storms in WA and southern Queensland and strong showery winds in Tasmania. A high-pressure system is bringing dry and stable conditions in the west and southeast of the state, but unsettled conditions in the northeast are due to a low-pressure trough. Tomorrow, a strong, gusty southerly change will bring milder conditions to the coast for a few days. But from Thursday, temperatures will start building again, becoming hot to very hot by the weekend. Around the capitals tomorrow, cool and cloudy in Hobart and Melbourne, a high of 36 in Perth. Around New South Wales tomorrow, staying warm in the northeast with some more showers and the chance of a thunderstorm. There'll also be the odd shower along the central coast. Winds in the northeast will be northerly ahead of a southerly change. Further south, it'll be mainly sunny, but there will be a drop in temperature once that southerly moves through. Fire danger will be very high in parts of the Riverina. There's a warning for large and powerful surf conditions along parts of the coast. Inland, temperatures will be mild to warm for this time of year, low 30s in the south, pushing up into the mid to high 30s in the northwest. A strong wind warning's in place for Sydney waters tomorrow as the southerly change comes through. The change will bring strong winds and some light showers to the city and a drop in temperature, maximums times in the low 20s. Sun's up at 6:02, and those southerly winds will continue on Wednesday, but the showers will clear, and by Thursday we'll see temperatures warming up again with a return to hot and sunny weather by the weekend. And that is ABC News. Laura Tingle is here now with 7:30.